So now we're going to look at the development of the B cells and T cells. So B cells and T cells, you remember, so B cells is part of the humoral response where we have all the production of antibodies created from B cells. T cells is our part of the cell-mediated response, which were the examples where there's multiple types of T cells. For example, you have the soldier cells, which are the cytotoxic T cells. You have the regulatory cells, which are the immunosuppressive cells. You have the helper T cells, which help allowing for the correlation of the actual activity of the adaptive immune response to take place, right? And so what's really important is to actually understand where the development takes place. The development, the creation, the activity, the immunogenicity, right? So when we say something is immunogenic, right, what does that mean? So immunogenic means they can trigger some kind of immune response, right? Whether it's some kind of protein, we can call it an antigen, or an immune cell, which can cause an immune response, right? So immunogenic is actually a term used for an immune response, right? And so looking at these actual developments here, you can see that from before, what did I tell you? I said all blood cells, whether white blood cell, red blood cell, cell fragments like platelets, megakaryocytes, all of these blood cells are created where? All blood cells are created in the bone marrow. So all of them are created in the bone marrow. And however, whether depending on the maturation phase of it, that's what they differ on, right? So for example, when we're comparing the development of and the progression of the B cells and the T cells, their lives start in the bone marrow, right? So if you remember what type of cells that was involved with the B cell and T cell development, so if you remember all of the HSCs, right? So hematopoietic stem cells is a high population of them in your bone marrow, and they give rise to these B and T cells through the process of leukopoiesis, right? And so here, when we look at the B cells and T cells, both of these cells are created in the bone marrow. So the B and T cells are both created in the bone marrow, right? And like I said, it's due to the actual differentiation process created from the hematopoietic stem cells. However, when we look at the actual maturation, it's completely different. B cells, right? So now, just because these cells are created doesn't necessarily mean they're immunogenic, right? So they need to be activated somehow, right? And they're activated through the maturation phase. So B cells further develop in the bone marrow. So their development phase of maturation, right? So they mature in the bone marrow. Vice versa, the T cells, actually, even though they're created in the bone marrow, they migrate to this lymphoid tissue called the thymus, right? So this thymus is a lymphoid tissue that's very large when you're born, but it begins to atrophy as you age, and eventually there is no prevalence of it. So the thymus is located on top of the heart, right? And so thymus is a location where the T cells mature. So this maturation takes place in the thymus for the T cells. That's why the T cells are called T cells, for thymocytes. B cells are called for bone marrow cells. They mature in the bone marrow.